Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, a matchup we're going to see Saturday afternoon that I think is just about as virtually impossible to predict as it gets. Oklahoma heading on the road to play Auburn, two programs that I've become kind of a massive fan of over the last couple of months, most notably because both the Oklahoma fans, the Auburn fans, you guys continue to show a ton of support to the boys, and in return, I've become fan of both of these programs. Before we even get into the matchup, I kind of just want to dive into where these two teams are at heading into Saturday afternoon because I think both fan bases are just so frustrated in terms of the product that you saw on the football field. You look at this Oklahoma team, the one question mark we had for Oklahoma heading into 2024 was the offensive line. Like, I think this defense, this is an Oklahoma defense that gave you every opportunity to win that football game Saturday night against one of the best offenses in the country in Tennessee. The Oklahoma offense didn't give you a chance to win. Then you look at Auburn and say, look, this is an Auburn offense that's averaging 6.5 yards per play. That's top 25 in the country, but only scoring 24.3 points per game, which is outside of the top 75 because they can't stop turning the football over. And so both of these programs have aspects of this team that you really like, but they have deficiencies that are costing them football games to start out 2024. Want to get into kind of where Auburn is, where Oklahoma is, how this matchup might be going Saturday afternoon. Now, before we get into it, as always, whether you're an Auburn fan, Oklahoma fan, I'm going to kind of get some takes off my chest in terms of where I think these two programs are. I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section, whether you just want to vent, whether you disagree with some of my takes. I think that's the beauty of doing this. I appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. Let's start with Oklahoma. I think and look, Jackson Arnold wasn't nearly good enough. You know what I mean? And I think Michael Hawkins probably should get the start against Auburn. That's at least my personal take. That being said, you can't win with that Oklahoma offensive line. I'm seeing these national media talking heads get up there and put it all on the quarterback. And again, I don't think Jackson Arnold was nearly good enough, has not been good enough to start the season. But we kind of said it to go into 2024. You can't go into the SEC with the problems that Oklahoma had on the offensive line. It didn't look good the first 3 games of the season, and we were kind of just holding out hope that it would come together before Tennessee came to town. Like, it simply didn't. This Oklahoma team cannot run the football. They're averaging 3.6 yards per carry. That's 96th in the country. They are awful in pass protection, giving up a sack and 8.7% of dropbacks. That's 112th in the country. When you can't run the football and you can't pass protect in the SEC, it's going to be hard to win a lot of football games. Even though this Oklahoma defense, I think, is a top 10 unit in the country, at least in my mind. And so for Oklahoma, I think maybe a quarterback switch, especially with a guy like Michael Hawkins, who is crafty. He knows how to evade pressure. He can get outside the pocket. Look, Jackson Arnold's a good athlete, but he's much more of a linear guy, kind of needs to build up some speed. Michael Hawkins, kind of like Kyler Murray in the pocket. And so I think he might be the better suited quarterback to run this Oklahoma offense while the Oklahoma offensive line is struggling. But again, I don't think it's much on the quarterback because then you look at the pass catchers and say, well, Nick Anderson, obviously not healthy. They're so banged up. There's not really many difference makers surrounding the quarterback either. Now you look at this Auburn team, it's just been turnovers. And again, I mean, 6.5 yards per play. If I would have told the Auburn fans that this offense, and I was high on Auburn heading into 2024, the Auburn fans know that, had them in as a top 25 team entering the 2024 season. If I were to told the Auburn fans that this Auburn offense is averaging 6.5 yards per play, that's 25th best in the country, I think a lot of Auburn fans would say, sweet, we're hosting Oklahoma as an undefeated football team late in September. Well, you're 2-2 because you can't stop turning the football over. Whether it's Hank Brown, whether it's Peyton Thorne, I'm not a fan of how Hugh Freeze has managed the quarterback situation. Like, look, if you were going to go with Hank Brown, at least in my opinion, you kind of had to accept that there were going to be some growing pains. Like, you threw him out there against New Mexico, kind of knew that would be a kind of a cupcake game for Hank Brown to get some confidence. You had to have known that at some point Hank Brown was going to struggle. I guess you didn't really want him to struggle that bad in terms of 3 interceptions in the first half, but I think Hugh Freeze, from a mentality standpoint, making the switch, needed to better accept that there were going to be problems, or not problems, but growing pains with Hank Brown at quarterback. And it just didn't seem like Hugh Freeze was willing to kind of accept that was going to happen. Let's get into the matchup now. So those are my two takeaways. Like, you look at Oklahoma, again, a good team that I think has a deficiency that is very hard to work around when you're trying to win football games in the SEC. Then you look at Auburn and say, this team is so much better than they were last year, but it's not. And I think I can see Auburn fans disagreeing with that, but they are better. Like the numbers say it. I think what we see on the football field, they're much more explosive passing the football. But when you turn the football over as much as Auburn has in those two games against Cal and Arkansas, you just can't win. Those are crucial mistakes. So both of these teams, I think, are relatively good football teams with parts of their team that just makes it really hard to win. Now let's get into this matchup here. You look at Oklahoma going on the road, playing Auburn. I would expect to see Michael Hawkins start. That's just my personal opinion. We'll kind of see what Brent Venables and how he decides to handle that. The biggest question mark is if Michael Hawkins is going to be your guy, does that give you a little bit more juice in the run game? I think that's been the biggest problem with this Oklahoma team is not being able to run the football on first and second down when you consistently put an offensive line that is just not good in pass protection in those third and long situations where you have teams pinning their ears back and getting after the quarterback. That's kind of a death sentence. And so I think if you're Oklahoma, the number one thing you're trying to address, especially going on the road to Auburn here, that has what I think are really good edge rushers and guys like Falk and Jalen McLeod, we got to figure out to be more efficient on first and second down, whether that's running the quarterback, whether that's mixing up some of the concepts that we've been using on first and second down. It's got to get fixed because you can't go on the road here and consistently live in third and long situations, especially with how the quarterback's been playing, the offensive line's been pass protecting. And if you're Auburn, I think you got to continue to do a better job managing mobile quarterbacks. Didn't think they did a very good job against Cal. Didn't think they did a very good job against New Mexico. You're going to have another one potential with Michael Hawkins, who wants to get outside the pocket. Look, I think DJ Durkin had a pretty solid game plan against Taylor Green. I don't even think they went over 350 total yards in that football game. That still has to be a key concern for this Auburn defense going up against Michael Hawkins. Now, flipping the sides here, you look at this Auburn offense and say, why aren't we running the football more? You have Jarquez Hunter's averaging 7.1 yards per carry. Damari Allison, I know which fumbled, is averaging 7.8 yards per carry. This Auburn offense, I know you got all these new toys on the outside. You know, Keandre Lambert-Smith is putting together a phenomenal season for Auburn. We all know what guys like Cam Coleman or even Malcolm Simmons, another true freshman that's been playing very good football for Auburn. We know what they can do. But when you look at the numbers and say this is a top 20 rushing attack in the country, you got both your two running backs that are mainly getting used are averaging more than 7 yards every time they have the football in their hands. Why aren't we going to that more? Especially when you look at this Auburn offense and say this Auburn offensive line is much better in the run blocking department than they are in pass protection. I think Hugh Freeze is obviously a very good offensive-minded coach. He's kind of made a living doing that. That being said, I look at it and say you have to be a coach that's willing to call up plays and build an offense around what your personnel is. And right now it's telling me that this Auburn offense can really run block. You got two ball carriers that can run the rock. I think you got to go to that more. Now, the tricky part in this situation is you look at Oklahoma and say they're a top 5 run defense in the country, 2.5 yards per carry, did a phenomenal job stopping the run against the Tennessee rushing attack that's one of the best in the country. I think the second key matchup for Auburn is, hey, you have an Oklahoma defense that's forcing 3 turnovers per game. That's top 5 in the country. This is an Auburn offense that's one of the worst in the country in turning the football over. So you start looking at this matchup and say, I don't see Auburn running the football that successfully against Oklahoma's defense. You have an Oklahoma defense that's been forcing a ton of turnovers throughout the first 4 weeks of the season. Getting into my pick here, I'm going to go Oklahoma as a 2.5-point road favorite against Auburn. Not sure what we're going to get at starting quarterback for either of these two teams. This is obviously a massive toss-up game, and it kind of feels like a massive game for both of these teams to get some, at least a little bit of positive momentum kind of going into the rest of SEC play. We'll see how it goes out. Those are kind of, again, we didn't do as much of the game preview aspect of it because I wanted to focus a little bit more on, where these two programs are as a whole. I'm going to go Oklahoma because I think I trust the defense a little bit more in this football game. I think Auburn, until they show me they ain't turning the football over, Oklahoma's forcing turnovers like a top 5 team in the country. So give me Oklahoma on the road here. Don't feel great about it. I don't think a lot of Oklahoma fans feel great about it, especially with how this offensive line's been playing, now having to go on the road for the first time. We'll see how it goes. This will be a game that we're going to learn a lot about both these programs and where they are going the rest of the 2024 season. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear how the Auburn, Oklahoma fans are kind of feeling about the takes in the comment section. We'll talk to y'all later.